Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian set review podcast. My name is Serge. Joining me today, I got a Nelly.
I'm here.
I got a Wheeler.
I've got 2 drinks.
And we got a James.
I've only got 1 drink.
Point, Wheeler.
Yikes.
Hello and welcome to our Universes Beyond Roundup. So we haven't done a Universes Beyond talk since sort of early 2023, basically at the end of Lord of the Rings. And what we've done here is collected a bunch of mechanically unique cards from 2022 and 2023 and 2024 to talk about. We've got Doctor Who, we've got the Fallout set, we've got Assassin's Creed, we've got the Ravnica Clue. Did I miss anything there?
I think all of the Jurassic Park cards went extinct.
No, we have one. We have one Jurassic Park card.
We have one Jurassic Park card that may or may not have gone extinct.
Right, and maybe Lara Croft. Anyways, a whole collection, but the main goal here is, as with all of our set reviews, it's not exhaustive. We're talking about the cards that are either making a splash in the format or we think are worth discussing, and again, that are mechanically unique. So let's jump right into it, and we'll start.
We'd like to thank our sponsors at patreon.com/loading ready run before we jump into it. Without your support, we couldn't do this. So thank you very much.
The sponsor throw, Wheeler.
I mean, I was going to do that, but I guess I could start talking for my first card.
I want to do my first card.
Okay.
I'm stealing this one because it's a food card. We're going to start off with Astrid Peth. This is a 2-mana 2/2 legendary human for 1 and a white. Whenever Astrid enters the battlefield or attacks, create a food token, and they have a flavor ability, Brand New Sky. Whenever you sacrifice a food or a clue token, explore. This is everything that I want to see in a food generating card. Specifically, it's on ETB and attack. So it is a renewable, reliable, constant source of food. And honestly, I'm so happy with that first ability that I reliably, constantly forget about the entire second explore ability, which comes up a lot. I think this card is a slam dunk. It is basically always played in the food deck. I don't think it is strong enough to see any mid-range play outside of that, but I like this card a lot. I want more stuff at this power level, specifically at 2, even though it's a legend.
There's been I don't know how to describe it other than Bant Game Objects deck, which is like Triple Mox, Tolarian Academy, and then what if my Tireless Tracker and my Urza and my Astrid Peth all smooched? And you rely on a lot of constructs, but a lot of mana generation. It plays like the food deck. How badly do I want to set a burn? It plays like the food deck. I have retired
that deck because I went...
But it wins games?
Full disclosure. In a recent recording session of both a stream and stuff, I'm 0 for 14 in the last 14 games I played with food. I am setting it aside, and I've been thinking about the game option deck. 1 mana Tameo into 2 mana this, into any of the 3 drops, 4 mana Urza.
Very proud of you,
Tolarian
Serge.
Academy. I have cooked as much as I can cook with the food deck, and I have to set it aside for my own well-being.
Well, to speak to this card's strength and an issue with the food deck and an advantage of the game objects deck is that this is a 2-drop. And so, like, getting to split from that 3-drop awkward spot to, like, you have more 2s, which Astrid is just, like, very good at, filling that role. Yep. And then on your 3, instead of trying to jam another, like, card that'll get Caracas or a Hobbit or whatever. I mean, you still play some of the Hobbits.
Yeah, they're really good.
But, yeah, you get more options with what you're doing. And, like, for what it's worth, like, sacrificing your food on turn 3 after Astrid is not exciting, but if you need to hit your land drops or need to push damage with her, like, that's not nothing. Which is kind of nice.
It feels so much better to crack a clue for no value than it does to crack a food. Like, the timing of when to actually sacrifice food in the food deck is honestly very challenging to figure out, but you always want to draw cards.
I too love cycling my Renewed Faith rather than casting my Renewed Faith.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
that's just because you're good at magic.
Huh?
I like the idea of being able to sacrifice your clues or food to something else too, and at least Astrid doesn't care how they went away. Like if you are under some sort of Torment of Hailfire situation or whatever. I can't think of a good opportunity to sacrifice a bunch of artifacts because I am dumb. But I love that that ability is open-ended.
There's some like commander combo with this card in KCI and like another like when you sack a thing, or when a 1/1 counter is put on a thing, you make a token, and so like you sack that. I think it involves the manufacturer as well.
Yeah.
TLDR, there are also combo applications with this card that start with KCI and her, and that's a pretty good starting spot.
Thank you. KCI is the card
Wow.
specifically I was
Yeah.
trying to remember.
Yeah.
Wheeler, next card.
Also from the Dr. Hoomst, Banish to Another Universe. This is an enchantment for 4 and a white that has affinity for historic permanence. So the spell costs 1 less to cast for each artifact, legendary, and or saga permanent you control. When Banished to Another Universe enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent and opponent controls until Banished to Another Universe leaves the battlefield. So this is a Banishing Light sort of a card, but it is a bit closer to Leyline Binding in that often when you are playing this card, you are spending 1 mana to send something to the Shadow Realm. You don't get to do it at instant speed, but the decks that are playing this tend to operate at sorcery speed anyways. This is a card that has popped up a couple of times in some of the Tolarian Academy, like control the board sort of decks. I've seen a couple of the 3-color to 4-color Time Vault lists play this as like I need to get this thing off the board, and I have an Enlightened Tutor. And I don't have a great thing to tutor for that isn't, a large amount of mana or whatever. And those decks can occasionally play Leyline Binding if they want to stretch their mana base a little bit, but those are also decks that play anywhere of like 8 or so artifact lands. And so getting this to be very cheap in those kind of decks and being a nice flexible kind of tutorable removal spell outside of like Portable Hole or whatever is pretty nice. It's a card that has kind of I don't want to say fallen off. It's definitely a meta call in that like which direction do you want to take your Tolarian Academy control / mid-range deck? Which like do you want to protect your planeswalkers with this card, or would you rather play like Wrath Effects or whatever? But it still packs a punch, and it's a good like 97th to 100th card.
Can we talk about how clunky it was reading that card post Foundations?
Yeah,
There's so many extra words on it. Right?
I tried to like wire my brain to ignore the battlefield on older cards, and it is really difficult to undo 25 years of gameplay.
But also, you're supposed to read when this enters. Period,
exactly, right? Because
Yeah.
it shortens its own name. It gets sort of, it's like when this enters, and you're like scroll.
Yeah.
I also wonder, after reading this card, if Leyline Binding might get reprinted with affinity for basic land types.
Well, it has domain.
Oh,
that is
okay.
affinity for
domain. For domain. I don't know. Yeah, right. It's domain. This costs less, right?
Yeah.
Anyways.
Nelly.
Okay, more white cards. Now we're moving to the world of Fallout. It's pre-war formal wear. Pick it up. For 2 and a white, you get an artifact equipment with when pre-war formal wear enters the battlefield, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield and attach pre-war formal wear to it. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has vigilance, and you can equip it for 3 mana. This card's become a staple of the format. When I've been looking at lists recently, I'm not certain, I haven't done the math, but trying to keep caught up on recent tournament deck lists, it seems like this is a more common equipment in Canadian Highlander decks than Umezawa's Jitte. It plays a little bit different than most equipments. We still see plenty of Skull Clamps and Shadow Spears because they're available through Saga as well as Stoneforge Mystic. But targets for Stoneforge Mystic seems like this is number 1, and then maybe you play another one that can't also be gotten by Saga, but maybe you don't. And instead of needing to have a creature on the battlefield already, this one can bring one back for you. So it sort of plays like Living Weapon, where it like provides you with the body and doesn't require you to risk mana or even risk the ETB attaches for free trigger that some equipments have to target a creature, and then it'll get removed by a Swords to Plowshares in response. Instead, you've just got to kill their Scavenging Ooze before you get it into play. And at 3 mana for +2/+2 and vigilance in the late game, it still threatens to be relevant. It's just like that's those are pretty good stats. I like that it's sort of like a sword, right? Like it's 3 mana for +2/+2.
It's so similar to the casting cost. The whole
Yeah.
experience.
It's kind of like, they finished the whole sword saga and then they gave us one more when we were like, no one asked for this. But then they gave us this one and it was like, all right, sword lovers. It turns out there was one more that we wanted to see. Yeah.
It's like, think of the play patterns with Stoneforge Mystic when you would get Cauldron Complete or Batterskull, right? It's like, you either kill this or you're probably going to lose. And this doesn't have that overwhelming bulk of those two cards, but like, I've got my pre-war Formaware. Do you want to kill my Stoneforge Mystic so I can go and find the other one?
Yeah.
Yeah, or the flexibility of like the Nadu decks to be like, I have my Nadu. I have found Shuko. You have killed my Nadu. I have found pre-war Formalware.
Yeah. I also I pointed it out, but I really love the flavor design that, like, this is an outfit to go to a ska show, and we've got our cool fingerless gloves and our mohawk. And what do you do when you cast it? You pick up a creature from your graveyard and put it back into the battlefield. Just lovely.
I do like the change that equipment has been making recently of moving away from this is what kills your opponent to this is now utility. This is, it feels like Green Sun used to be this utility toolbox that you could find answers with, and now increasingly Stoneforge is being given that too, and it's just making it even more powerful tutor. And again, making me change the way I build my equipment decks. I know, I'll take the L on that again. I'm trying, I'm learning. All right, next up, we have the Securitron Squadron. This is a 2-mana 2/2 artifact creature robot for 1 and a white, and it has Squad 3. As an additional cost to cast this spell, you may pay 3 any number of times. When this creature enters the battlefield, create that many tokens that are copies of it. It has Vigilance, and whenever a creature token enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 on it. So this is an interesting sort of lord for the go wide token strategy that in the late game, if you have a bunch of mana, so let's say theoretically you're a token deck and you have a Gaia's Cradle, you have the ability to sort of build your own army with it. I think it is a strong role player in sort of those archetypes. It's an artifact creature that makes more artifact creatures. That's also good for the artifact creature decks. I don't have a tremendous amount more to say for this.
Well, the artifact decks also tend to make artifact creature tokens.
Like the Karnstructs, you like it?
Karnstructs,
Yeah.
Thopters,
Yeah.
Servos. This can be 5 mana for 5/5 worth of stats, both with Vigilance across 2 bodies, which is pretty good because it has the weird like Kappa Cannoneer wording of like when the token version of this comes into play, it triggers itself.
So yeah, how does the timing work? You pay for Squad.
Yep.
And then when this enters, you create that token. So the cardboard version will be on the table.
Would it be the second would be a 4/4?
It'll be a 4/4,
Yeah, sorry,
won't
it's
it?
a 6/6. Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
5 mana,
Yeah.
6/6 across 2 bodies is
Yeah.
way spicier.
And like also just the tokens decks. I mean, if you're Jason Jobin, you always have 2 Moxen. That's a very local joke.
Called out.
He deserves it. He's won enough. But also, yeah, the tokens decks are typically on a triple Mox spread. And also, if the things are going right, well, you're dead. Or things are going right, they've hit their Moxes and they've cast this ahead of schedule. Or if things are going, not so right, it's a deck that can just chump block and like survive
Until you get the time. Yeah.
until you get to the
Infinite
time.
bodies.
And, yeah.
What
just-
colors?
Mardu or Jeskai have been very popular.
No green.
Well, there are green versions too, but he's been really like Mardu and Jeskai are the 2 ones that he has been focusing on mostly over the past couple of years. Yeah, and they're bangers.
I could also see like an argument for this card in an Academy deck where you have a certain number of spots that you're going to put in to be flexibly win conditions or road bumps, right? Because this can actually do both. You can play it on 2, which again might be early for you in an Academy deck, and then chump block. And like your plan is just to put this in front of Ragavan as soon as you can. Or if you're at the Paradox Engine stage of the game, you're like, okay, well, it doesn't have haste, but 400 power, pass.
Yeah, infinite artifacts.
Yeah,
There you
infinite
go.
artifacts, and then say go, and if I get to untap, then I can attack for lethal.
Cool.
Back to Wheeler.
Tax Collector from the Assassin's Creed product. 1 and a white for a 2/2 human advisor with when Tax Collector enters, choose 1. Tax. Until your next turn, spells your opponent's cast cost 1 more to cast. And Arrest. Detain target creature and opponent controls. For those of you that don't remember Return to Ravnica, Detain says, until your next turn, that creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So Tax Collector has shown up in the mono-white humans decks, the Death and Taxes style decks, as well as the white-black versions of this deck. And I've seen it appear in a cheeky blink deck, like Bant Blink, because getting to repeatedly use the Tax Collector is kind of spicy. But in its most typical application, this is the thing that you have in a deck with like Thalia and Mana Denial, and maybe it dies, and then you Helping Hand or Savine's Reclamation it back, and then you're like, oh,
Formal wear.
Yeah, you pre-war formal wear it back, or like, I don't know, you draw your Ephemerate, and you're like, oh, well, Ephemerate this Tax Collector, that thing can't block now, I'm going to kill you. So it kind of pulls early on, it really restricts what your opponent's doing. And then later on, you're like, oh yeah, I have ways of putting creatures back into play. I'm going to make it so you can't block, and I'm going to kill you. So it's good at like the early disruption, and then that pivot point of like, well, now I really got to put the nail in the coffin.
Is that an uncommon as well?
Yes. Yeah, and it's a human. That's the biggest thing, is that like the humans decks, they are very good, but also you can tell when they start to fall off, when you're like, oh, I can't help but notice you're on like a remorseful cleric, huh? That's not a human.
That's a bit of a deep cut.
Yeah, that's oh, okay. But this is another 2-drop human with a easy, like a 1 and a white. That's pretty easy casting cost. We're not looking at double white, reasonable body. Yeah, good. If you if you're against a slower deck and they're like Champion of the Parish, or you're like Champion of the Parish into Tax Collector, I just feel like I'm dead.
Well,
it's just I can't do anything.
If you've ever, I mean, I know Thorn of Resistance stays along longer than that, but like Thalia, these 1 mana taxes on turn 1 or turn 2 are backbreaking, because you often keep your 7 expecting a certain
curve,
like flow or curve of development of your board and your strategy, and you're just like, oh yeah, this is great. I've got, turn 1 Mox Ragavan, and your opponent's like Mox this on turn 1, and you look at your hand and you're like, I've been time walked.
Yeah.
I actually can't do anything. It's devastating.
It's worth noting too, it has the better templating where it says spells your opponents cast cost more rather than counter it unless they pay 1, because then there's some things that get around that, like Cavern of Souls, for example. But this one means they can't even get it onto the stack unless they have the extra mana. Also, these decks, they're always loaded, like the D&T style decks are always loaded up with legendary creatures, so it's great to have as many non-legendary creatures as possible, and also creatures that aren't holding a static. Like most of the tax creatures are providing their benefit by remaining on the battlefield, so having one that both proactively hits your opponent with the tax one way or the other, and then is just ready to die. It's just ready to attack in combat. It's really nice to have at least one of those on your D&T battlefield at all times, so that you can, start closing the game.
You don't have to worry about the Storm player chain of vaporing it, and you're like, oh, yeah, I thought I had it.
Right, exactly.
It's just like, no, it just locks you out.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to blue and talk about Crystal Skull Isu Spyglass. 2 blue for a legendary artifact that says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play historic lands and cast historic spells from the top of your library, and it taps for a blue. So interesting, like combination Manolith and Future Sight here. You can't play any card from the top of your library, although it does cost 1 less mana than Future Sight and is an artifact, and taps for a blue. So hopefully that makes up for it. You can still cast all of your artifacts as well as sagas. I'm not sure how often that's coming up. And then legendary creatures and play legendary lands. Historic lands, artifact lands as well. Artifact and I guess Urza's Saga is a saga. So you can play Urza's Saga, which is the one you'll have in your deck. Urza's Saga is an enchantment, but it's a saga, so it counts. So in like a Paradox Engine deck, that's a lot of hits.
Yeah.
Like this is close to a Future Sight.
That's so
I'll let you finish. If I may switch the I just want to switch the terminology a little bit.
Sure.
Mystic Forge.
Sure. It's close to a Mystic Forge.
You don't think this is a Future Sight, eh?
Well, Future Sight is the oldest one, but Mystic Forge is the most played.
It's the one that you would associate with the Paradox decks.
Yeah. I mean, I've played actual Future Sight with Paradox.
Babe, I know.
Babe, I know.
But
I know.
we
the
have
kids
been
these
playing
days-
this format longer than some of our listeners have been alive.
I know.
Like,
Stop.
I'm sorry.
I want to talk about the journey of Future Sight here because I think it's fascinating. Because Future Sight was a staple in our format for years. And it was sort of the go button that let big control decks sort of go from stabilizing to winning the game. Because, you'd go turn 4 Wrath, you've ended the aggression that your opponent was doing, turn 5. And Future Sight is so weird because it doesn't do anything. But it sets up this incredible value engine and card advantage engine that the longer the game goes, the more value you accrue. And then Academy decks, when they started to emerge, because that's actually a newer emerging archetype than Future Sight decks. When Academy decks came out, we started to see this incredibly busted synergy between cards like a Sensei's Divining Top and Future Sight, where you could start to draw your entire deck and sort of further leverage that advantage. But there came a point where even like Blue Moon decks, which were playing Future Sight for a while, stopped playing it because it was just too slow as a 5-drop. It's 5 mana,
yeah.
and it doesn't affect the board the turn it comes down. And it was amazing as a judge how much I had to learn about the specific interactions of Future Sight. That's how dominant that card was in the metagame in the early days. So I can't help but look at this as a Future Sight because of my boomer history in the format. And like, look at what they've done to my boy to get a fraction of his power, right? Like, you've made it cheaper, you've made it an artifact, you've made it a mana rock, but you've also had to restrict it on the same time because we can't just make Future Sight but cheaper.
But I'm totally okay with my Paradox Academy deck being restricted to artifacts, legendary cards, sagas, with Urza Saga being the only real one.
Yeah. So thank you for letting me have the
You're
history
good.
lesson.
No,
by the
you're
way,
good. Yeah. Sorry, I was like, as I was reading, I'm like doing the list. I'm like, wait, this hits 88 cards in the Paradox Academy deck.
And for what it's worth, it being a legendary card is relevant for Search for Glory.
Right.
The 3-mana card that basically tutors for what this wants to play off the top, but meaning that you can now tutor for your Mystic Forge is pretty hot. And it just, if you have Paradox in play, it just adds a blue for some reason.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
Kind of funny.
It's like they gave it a mana ability in case you were curious which deck you're supposed to put it in, right?
Yeah.
It's like, do you have a deck that untaps permanents?
Well, I mean, it is worth mentioning that in the rare occasion that you have no other mana-producing non-land permanents, the combo of this Paradox and Top just gets the job done.
That's right. You've got Infi Storm.
Yeah.
You've drawn your deck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. Serge, you want to talk about
Yeah, we'll move on. Sorry, I'm still just
Serge is
staring at
waxing
this
poetic
line.
over there. Serge needs to
if
come
we
down
want to
from
talk
talking
about,
Future Sight.
I do have a cool Future Sight like anecdote / note about its place in the format, where it did see. So Future Sight, like you said, was played in a lot of like control decks and combo decks, right?
Yep.
Academy decks and whatnot, and it really hit a fall off point with the printing of Night of Autumn, because Night of Autumn meant that players could play Reclamation Sage and Night of Autumn and maybe like Kasali Pride Mage in their green decks, specifically the Green Sun Zenith decks, and have access to additional enchantment disruption that didn't feel like you were adding just another like kind of brick in certain matchups. Right. You draw your Rec Sage against some decks, you're like, oh.
Like goblins.
Right. But Night of Autumn is always going to be something. But then as players trimmed the Reclamation Sages and just said, I only need a Night of Autumn because why do I need 2 of these? And maybe they got some additional kind of disruptive cards that hit a variety of permanents. We did actually see a brief resurgence of Future Sight in Jeskai control.
Oh, Jeskai, sure.
Where this would have been 2020, 2021, where it was just like the Jeskai, the heavy Jeskai control decks, before their Ragavans, before every deck could pressure the board, were like, yeah, I'll tap for 5 and play this card, or like Primordial Mists or whatever. Like, while the other decks are like, this is when Blue Moon decks were playing like Goblin Dark Dwellers and like Arc Slogger and crap. Like, you could play a 5-drop, and that was one of their 5-drops of choice until, well, Modern Horizons 2 sped up the format, and Haywire Might came out with Brothers War, and it became a little more difficult to justify playing that card. But yeah, Future Sight has a very interesting history across our format. That's it.
All right, next up, let's talk about the Flesh Duplicate. This is from the Doctor Who set. Blue, you get a Shapeshifter Rebel. It's a 0/0 clone. So basically, when it enters the battlefield as a copy of any creature except it has Vanishing 3. And Vanishing, if you're not familiar with that mechanic, a permanent with Vanishing 3 enters the battlefield with 3 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last one is removed, sacrifice it, which is different from Fading. So this one lasts 3 turns instead of 4?
Yeah.
Would be the difference between Vanishing and Fading.
Yeah. Vanishing is the more intuitive one.
Yeah. This is cool. So previously, and I've hosed myself a number of times on clones. Previously, we have not had a lot of 2-mana clones. I can only think of Phantasmal Image.
That's
that's
more or
it.
less correct.
Yeah.
I'm not going to call you on Dwari Shapeshifter
Right.
or Renegade Doppelganger.
And
Sure.
although this card has a very short shelf life of Vanishing 3, it does not have the massive downside that Phantasmal Image has of dying if it's targeted by any spell. Now, where I'm very excited to see this card is Turbo Initiative decks or any of the Blink decks. So previously with Phantasmal Image, you cannot Ephemerate or any of those things, your Phantasmal Image, because it would die from the sacrifice trigger, never have a chance to do this. So you can either have this come into play as, your White Plume Adventurer and Turbo Initiative, in which case you don't care because they're probably going to die before 3 turns, or you can just reset it over and over. So while you're like, oh, this is only a 2-mana clone, it has some downside, it has a tremendous amount of upside for its cheap mana cost, especially for filling out a curve in, let's say, like a 3-color Blink Initiative deck or whatever. Or even as a pod target.
It's a great Seeker Walk card for
Yeah.
pod and Neo form.
Yeah. Next up, Wheeler.
Loyal Inventor from the Assassin's Creed product. 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human artificer with vigilance. When Loyal Inventor enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card, reveal it, and shuffle. Then you put that into your hand if you control an assassin. We don't. Otherwise, you put that card on top of your library. So this is just 3 mana, 2/3. Vigilance tech. I mean, I've killed people with Trinket Mage.
Yep. I've died in Trinket Mage.
Yeah, it'll happen. But
Why does it have 3 toughness?
it does find an artifact and put it on top. We have seen in some of the Underworld Breach decks that have popped up with the Breach Brain Freeze strategies where they will play Moonblessed Cleric, a 3-mana 3/2 that when it ETBs you find an enchantment and put it on top of your library. And this kind of card seems rancid, right? It's just like, why does this not put it into my hand? I want it into my hand. But it turns out putting Underworld Breach on the top of your deck is pretty damn good. Similarly, putting Black Lotus on the top of your deck so that they can't hand attack it is pretty damn good. Or just put it on the top and then be able to, crack a Chromatic Sphere or whatever to draw into it and then immediately go off is pretty reasonable. We have seen this card's in a kind of a weird spot where like the nature of the Storm decks in our format have shifted a bit, where there have still been a couple of Yogg-Will Storm lists that will play this style of card because you're looking to set up to turn 3 or usually turn 4 kill with disruption is kind of the tempo. And so playing this on 3 to be able to save you some life points, set up your Lotus to be able to get a big, Behold the Beyond or a big Ill-Gotten Gains kind of turn is pretty nice. It's not the best card in our list, but also it's just another classic case of like deck looking to do the most broken thing in Magic the Gathering, plays piece of crap like 3-drop creature.
But it's a tutor,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could also see it in Time Vault, right?
Yeah, I haven't personally played it in Time Vault, but yeah, the threat of the vault and also just having it in a spot where they can't duress it or whatever.
Yeah, or
is
just
kind of spicy.
a little bit of extra mana for the Enlightened Tutor, but you get to chump block.
Yep. Yeah. Jump block. I mean, for a lot of those decks, the real issue isn't the blue decks, it's the pressure the blue decks have. And so being able to like block a Ragavan or like, I don't know, if my opponent decides to flage this instead of my face, like, ooh, I'm excited. Yeah. Good for them.
Take that to the bank.
Yeah.
All right, Nelly.
Let's start the TARDIS. 1 and a blue for a sorcery that says Surveil 2, then draw a card. You may planeswalk.
Yeah, we didn't just ignore everything else.
And it also has Jumpstart. So this is a sorcery cantrip for 2 mana with Jumpstart. That's it. The sorcery in question is Preordain. Or no, it's better. It's better. It's Surveil. It's not Scry. Sorry. So it's mechanically unique. Or no, they put this on that split card from Guilds of Ravnica, right?
It is
Surveil
on
2 and draw a card.
Yes, it's Discovery.
Yes.
With Jumpstart.
Thank you. So it's Discovery with Jumpstart. Discovery was honestly, that was one of the cards I played the most in Canadian Highlander out of Guilds of Ravnica because it's a black. 2-mana preordained basically. But putting the cards in your graveyard is way better than putting them in your library, as we've all learned thanks to Murders of Karlov Manor.
Sorry.
No, I was just go ahead.
I mean, this one looks like a joke because it has Planeswalk on it, but honestly, out of all the cards that aren't pre-war formalware, this may have some of the most tournament wins just because it's so good in Reanimator. Gives you the a discard outlet as a part of a cost attached to a card that sets up your reanimation target and draws into it. Like, it's just very funny that it says you may Planeswalk.
Right. I don't recommend choosing to Planeswalk. You're going to want to stay on the current plane so you can win this game. But yeah, no, I mean, we don't have another 2-mana cantrip that's this good with Jumpstart. I think there is a Jumpstart cantrip for 2 mana that's just draw a card, right?
Radical Idea.
Thank you, Radical Idea. So that one's an instant. So to its credit, but this one says Surveil 2, which is, as Wheeler put, great for Reanimator.
Delve.
Yeah, and
anything.
Just set. Yeah, it's just a really strong ability. Honestly, you're gonna look at 3 cards if you need to. So it's just a really powerful cantrip. No problem. Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have the Synth Infiltrator. This is from the Fallout product. 5-mana 0/0 artifact creature Synth for 3 blue. It has Improvise, so your artifacts can help cast a spell. Each artifact you tap reduces the cost by 1. And then it's a clone, except it is a synth artifact creature in addition to its other types. So we have a very flexible artifact clone. I think the best comparison to this would be the 3 and a Phyrexian blue. What was that?
Phyrexian Metamorph.
Phyrexian Metamorph was a very powerful, toolbox artifact clone seen in a lot of decks, including Podless for a while. This has the same sort of thing, except you can cast it cheaper, and it has all of the upsides that we've talked about for other clones, except it's an artifact and additional type, which is great for all of the artifact strategies, which we've talked about a lot. I don't necessarily need to get too much into it because it's an artifact clone, but neat.
Yeah.
Yep.
Improvise is a weird ability. It's like your equipments can tap for Improvise. Your other artifact creatures. It doesn't, oftentimes when I'm playing a deck that's not intentionally trying to poop out 100 artifacts, it's you still have 1 or 2 to make it cheaper.
Yeah, Cap Canadier did a lot for the optics of Improvise, and I mean, War of Invention, obviously a banger card, but Improvise is just so much easier to activate than you think, and paying 2 mana for a clone that happens to be an artifact is pretty nice.
Wheeler.
Our only black card that is also secretly a gold card is Ezio Auditore da Firenze from Assassin's Creed.
By the way, good pronunciation. I was going to give up after Ezio if I got this one.
Oh, merci. 1 and a black for a 3/2 legendary creature, human assassin with menace. And assassin spells you cast have free running. Free running is free running black. Free running is a mechanic that says you may cast a spell for its free running cost if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with an assassin or a commander. This is likely not popping up too much, at least for proper assassins.
All 3 of us Scryfalled assassins to be like, what do we hit with this?
Well, I do know some of the cards that this puts into play. They just happen to be changelings.
Oh, sure.
And also, it's more of a so where this card has popped up in 5-color humans and Rakdos aggro or Rakdos midrange, excuse me, and Jund Legends of tournament top tournament appearing decks or whatever. It's top 3 tournaments in the past couple of years. I haven't even finished reading this card.
This year.
That hopefully provides some context for we're not using this free running thing. But there are some slots where you're oh, hell yeah, I guess I'll put in Masked Vandal or whatever for black, because you're a 5-color deck and you may not have the right mana. Whenever Ezio deals combat damage to a player, you may pay Wooburg if that player has 10 or less life. When you do, that player loses the game. So this card seems very commandery, and it is, but
It has the word commander right on it, yeah.
But it is also a single pipped 2-drop that is a above rate human and above rate legend that can find itself in archetypes with access to Wooburg, right? 5-color humans, even like the Rakdos deck or like the Jund deck will play, the Rakdos deck will typically play like a Bayou and a Taiga for their Deathrite Shaman and makes a ton of treasures through Ragavan, Fable the Mirror Breaker, that sort of card. Or they could just play a Triumph if they really want to get this Ezio trigger. But that just wins the game. So it's like mostly played because it's a cheap, above rate card that fits a couple of requirements of being a human or being a legendary creature with an evasive ability that can also just randomly steal games. I've heard of one person winning with this activated ability or triggered ability, and that was good enough for me. I was like, okay, great.
I'm in, sold.
Yeah. If it can happen once, it can happen a second time.
Yep.
I don't know if we have another 1 in a black 3/2 menace.
No,
in black, like black specifically, right?
Not for 1 in a black. Yeah, this is like very above rate.
Yeah, it's very above right. Like Dothy Voidwalker, Shadow 3/2, right?
Yeah.
But this can also block. It's legendary, but just like it's on the mono black aggro radar.
Okay, so hear me out. We're mono black anyways, right? If we're building mono black aggro,
yeah.
What's a card that mono black aggro pilots have always wanted to put in their deck? Death's Shadow.
Right.
How do we make Death Shadows easier? We play every fetch land. We play every original duel that adds black. We play every shock land that adds black.
And now
every pain land.
Yeah, and now we're mono black Death Shadow.
We play 2 off-color Moxes and 4th Air Lingus in our mono black aggro deck, and then we play a bunch of red and white cards.
I actually don't hate that. I kind of love the idea of
Hear me out.
Spend the night.
Hear me out. It is Mardu Initiative, but it's mono black aggro Mardu Initiative.
We're technically mono black.
Yeah.
All right, Nelly, you're up.
I want to talk about Assaultron Dominator from Fallout. It's 1 and a red for a 2/2 artifact creature robot with when Assaultron Dominator enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and whenever an artifact creature you control attacks, you may pay an energy. If you do, put your choice of a +1/+1 first strike or trample counter on that creature. So play pattern by itself, Grizzly Bear, right? That's an artifact. And then when it attacks, you spend one of.
And
I know, but I want to give you the baseline.
Okay.
Well, when it untaps and attacks, you can pay one of the 2 energy it came with to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and then do that again. So the simplest minimum rate you're getting out of this card is if you untapped with it, it'll attack as a 3/3, and then if you untap with it again, it'll attack with a 4/4, and then things kind of go up from there. You can have other artifact creatures already on the battlefield when you play this. You can either pump them or give them first strike or evasion, or you can have other energy cards and possibly also other artifact creatures, and then you can keep this going so that each time you attack with an artifact creature, because it doesn't have to be once per combat step, it's just every artifact creature that attacks is going to have the option to spend one of the energies from the Dominator. So pretty solid card. I don't know. I ran into it recently in medium red. My medium red mirror opponent had it. And I've also seen it in I want to say Gruul Blitz or Gruul Monsters. I saw someone in red green playing it. I think also
those trample counters are getting really, really valuable.
I mean, I could see a version of red green Blitz that actually has an energy package. Like you get, because the good energy cards,
the old green energy cards are pretty.
Yeah, the Voltaic Brawler, the Discharge,
Leyland if you want.
The Cub is not that bad.
We're foreshadowing that we're going to talk about the energy deck in a bit. We acknowledge that is an emerging archetype, but we're just evaluating this as a mid-range threat currently.
And then I also saw it for sure in like Grixis Robots, or there was like Aggro Welder or something, or Jeskai.
I could see it.
Artifact themed decks.
There's a mono red build that has popped up locally too. Like Wooly has been playing it.
Yeah.
And I was actually chatting with him about this because I've seen it pop up in Modern. And I know that there are a couple of players on the Discord that are also looking into it. That's like Shrapnel Blast Red.
Yeah.
That is like, hey, there are so many good red adjacent artifacts that are cheap as well.
Panther.
as well as
Not a workshop deck.
There are like 3 to 4 actual copies of Shrapnel Blast now,
Right.
and like at 2 mana, some of them are even cheaper, but like 2 mana, like instant speed, pay 4 or instant speed, like sack an artifact or creature, deal 4 damage to any target. Like the club card, we'd be clubbing.
Club.
Heartfire from War of the Spark, Shrapnel Blast being the namesake one. And this is a card that I think would slide into that fairly well.
Yeah, it's been showing up quite a bit.
Yeah.
Next up, Hardliner Scarlet. This is from the Ravnica clue set, if you're curious what that big C is.
Let's get one more take there, Serge. That was beautiful, and I want to call it that
Did
from
I say
now on.
Hardliner?
Yeah.
Headliner?
It's like Scarlet is still up at the party after everyone else has left.
Headliner Scarlet from the Ravnica clue set, if you didn't know what that C was. 4 mana, 3/3 legendary human warlock with haste. When it enters the battlefield, creatures, plural, target player controls can't block this turn. And at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at it and play that card this turn. This is an incredible finisher. I mean, your entire board, we've talked about the power of individual cards that let you force through damage, like either tap down a blocker or make it unblockable, something like that. This can end the game. Or increasingly, as players are fighting over the initiative and over the monarchy, just being able to get through once and get that back. So in the offhand case that Scarlet comes down, you don't win, you still have the additional, at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. So this is rad in medium red, big red, Gruul monsters, any deck that wants to get, I mean, if you have a bigger version of like a fair version of red deck wins, like this card ends games or puts you in a position to end the game with a tremendous amount of advantage every turn after you land it.
It's also a human. That's like, I've died to this card when it was cast off Cavern of Souls. And I'm
Sick.
like, oh, no.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And because this always catches people, unless you've died to this card repeatedly in Vintage Cube, which is a very popular thing to do, is the first ability, the can't block ability, means that if I play this, resolve this trigger, and then you flash in a blocker afterward, that blocker it's not a blocker. It can't block because it just says like creatures you control can't block.
Oh,
well, because
this turn
the ability to target that, and that's something that honestly I want to call them like Magic rules out. For
it's
having
crap.
a really hard time explaining. Like I'm a level 2 judge, and I wouldn't intuitively grab that. I am aware that like the templating of creatures target player controls is like a weird like there's 2 ways that you either look for the set or this one where it's like this affects the player, and it affects the player till the end of the turn, right? And so I struggle with that ruling as well, so I totally sympathize anyone who flashed in their Resto Angel to try to block Headliner Scarlet, and
you're like, why can't I block here?
And then
you're
put
like,
their fist through their monitor or whatever, Great card.
Yeah. All right, Wheeler.
Synth Eradicator from the Fallout set, carrying on the medium red vibes here. 2 and a red for a 3/3 artifact creature, Synth Soldier with haste. Whenever Synth Eradicator attacks, exile the top card of your library. You may get 2 energy. If you don't, you may play that card this turn. Tap, pay 3 energy. Synth Eradicator deals 3 damage to any target. So this is a card that has 2 families. Like it just lives 2 lives. There is the medium red or the shrapnel red kind of decks of I'm just playing an ancient 2 mana haste threat that gets to do a Lelia impression and happens to be a 3/3. And for what it's worth, isn't a legend.
Yeah.
Medium red doesn't really care about getting Caracas too much because you're a Blood Moon deck. But, it does pop up, which is nice. And then there's also the energy decks, which we will get to later. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but getting to play an above rate card that repeatedly pops out energy that can also just like hit the table and immediately tap to kill a thing.
Yeah, you got
it's pretty
Kamal
dope.
Pit Fighter in your energy deck for 3 mana. Yeah.
Just it could just play like a weird Flame Tongue Kavu in the energy deck. This is one of the cards, much like Headliner Scarlet, that I have died to more than many of the other cards on this review. I guess the next card maybe. But pretty straightforward card. Kills them dead by attacking or in the right deck, just gaining energy and pinging things to death.
Nelly.
Okay, more colorless mana to spend on Veronica Dissident Scribe. Sorry, 2 and a red for a 3/3 human artificer rogue legendary creature with menace. And whenever Veronica attacks, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. And whenever you discard one or more non-land cards for the first time each turn, create a junk token. Okay, yeah, this card, I think you might have described it as your favorite UB card from this year or something. Like, it's got a ton going for it, and again, can live in multiple homes. The same exact mana cost and power toughness of Synth Eradicator. Instead of haste, it's got menace, so attacking will be a bit easier, but your opponent will have time to kill it before it gets to attack, unless you're rocking the boots or something. But then, similar to Inti, you've got an attack, discard a card trigger, and then another trigger on top of that cares about you discarding a card. This one just gives you the card back in your hand, which is nice, as opposed to forcing you to try to figure out what to do with it that turn. And then also gives you a junk token. So it's kind of like, if you're not familiar, the junk token is a 0 mana art. It's an artifact token with tap, sacrifice this, exile the top of your card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So the classic sort of red impulse draw, and you can only activate that as a sorcery. So this one, when she attacks, you discard a card, and then you get basically 2 cards back, although one of them is also an artifact permanent. So just a ton of value you get out of Veronica, and Menace makes her a little harder to block. You can slot. Now this part, I'm not sure actually where you see this showing up. You definitely could put it in medium red.
Legends, humans, red, artifact permanent cares. The black-red deck that we've been kind of workshopping with the discard advantage stuff like that.
That's one of them.
Right.
I like the Rakdos deck that looks at all the interactions between Lelia and Inti and says, how can I get one more legend involved in this? But that's how it creates so much card advantage. Party Thrasher from Modern Horizons 3, which I was kind of down on. Then it hangs out with all of these cards. I'm like, okay.
Right. You got a stew going.
Yeah, exactly.
In that Party Thrasher, right?
All right.
Yeah.
But also check pile, 4-color, no white, control mid-range style deck. There is a variation of check pile that goes heavy on. I like to say goes heavy on the goyfs,
right?
Where they're like Nethergoyf, Tarmogoyf, Barrowgoyf, and Pyrogoyf are all in that deck, and it plays all the discard cards, churning cards, delve cards, like Abhorrent Oculist. Almost has a weird unearth package, reanimate package too, of I'm churning through these cards. Maybe it plays the new Kiora from Foundations. Just gets them all back at 1 mana. Right. And it's just so much card advantage, so much card flow, while it's also just smacking you for 3 a turn with Menace. I killed a couple of you guys with this on a Showdown recording.
Or was it a paper fight?
It never showed up. You wanted it to in the game.
No, I definitely killed somebody with this on a recording.
What were you playing? Yeah,
I was playing check pile with the
It was
Great
in your check pile deck.
For
Yes.
a card
No, you killed me with it.
Yeah.
For a new card to make it into these 4-color good stuff decks just shows how much utility and value it provides.
Yeah. Especially for a legend without an ETB, right?
Yes.
That's a thing that we constantly say, it's a legend, doesn't have an ETB, and it dies to bolt. It should, by all metrics, not be worth our time, but then you play with it, and you're like, oh yeah, they don't always have it.
Right.
Or you play with it, and they have one of them, and you're like, well, I'm a Blood Moon deck, or I'm a Reanimate deck, and I'll get it back at some point in time. Yeah.
And the last red card we're going to talk about, also from the Fallout set, is Wild Wasteland. This is a 3-mana enchantment for 2 and a red. Skip your draw step. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards this turn. So there's a long tradition of red enchantments that try and give card advantage in a weird way. And historically, the one that we had the worst read on was the Ravnica one that had coffee in the flavor text. That was 4 mana. I can't remember.
Experimental Frenzy.
Experimental Frenzy. We're like, this is bad. And it ended up having, it was...
To our credit...
I wasn't on the podcast that much.
To our credit, it was good in Standard. It was still not great in Highlander.
Yeah.
People played it and were like, oh, this does the thing. It's like, well, yeah, it does the thing that it says on the box, but you're paying 4 mana to...
Right.
I digress.
So anyways, this one is a little bit interesting to me because the red has increasingly been getting more and more value from the exile the top cards of your library you may play in this turn is looking specifically at like Lelia. I don't know if every red deck wants to include this specifically, but there is starting to get enough density of this type of effect and this type of effect giving additional value that I'm like, all right, Wild Wasteland, you have my attention. We'll talk in the future.
I'm surprised you haven't been popping off about this because where I've seen it has been big red.
Okay.
Like this is,
Sure.
I've seen this. I saw a player play this at a tournament down in the States where they were like running the tables with big red, and they're just like, yeah, they just get this out early.
I mean,
and they're like 2
don't get
cards
me
a
wrong.
turn.
Don't get me wrong. I'm excited about this
Yeah.
because previously you had to pay 4 mana for this effect, and
Yeah.
it was 1 card per turn. And
Yeah.
mind you, that didn't replace your draw, so this is just +1.
Yeah.
Right.
And with an Ancient Tomb, you can get this down on turn 2 or something like that. Like,
Sure.
I'm not low on it.
No. But like not dying to Shieldred kind of, I mean, you still die to a forge
Sure.
power
Yeah.
creature, but like
Yeah.
the whole like, let's see, you Shieldred me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that rules. Or like,
doesn't no value from Orcish
well,
Bowmaster.
this
you
red,
know?
I'm pretty sure this red player, I don't know if it was at that event or if they had just ran into it in a different spot, but they're like, yeah, my opponent tried to brain freeze me and
Right.
they couldn't kill me.
We've got it's like an elephant in the room, right? It's like the least important thing about this card probably, but any card that shuts you off from dying to milling has that relevance.
Oh my god.
you know,
That's so
it's
funny.
It's not Laboratory Maniac,
Yeah.
but it does say right on the card, you know,
Sure.
like the red or the black green Lich from Guilds of Ravnica, you know, like various cards that have this
Sure.
like, instead of drawing
Draw
you do
replacement
X,
effect, yeah.
right? Then
And
it's like,
like,
well, it also stops you from dying to milling.
Maybe it was a thing that this breach player, this brain freeze player could have like played around, but they didn't, and that point mattered. You know,
Nice,
like,
yeah,
it's-
fair enough. And yeah, I
Thing
mean,
that
you're
can
not
come
going
up.
to get any more cards out of this either if you have no cards in your library.
Yeah.
But you're
maybe-
still not dead. Maybe you got lethal on the board.
Maybe you got Worm Coil Engine
Yeah.
tokens to kill them or whatever.
Great with
you know?
Crumbling Sanctuary.
All right, Wheeler.
All right, I'll talk about this stupid. Do you
Like,
want
we
to
can
trade?
switch. I'll
Yeah,
switch.
take
Switch
this.
me.
Take this
Switch
stupid
me.
sloth.
I'm the one who put Lumbering Mega Sloth on the list.
This is such a Nelly card.
10 green, so that's a 10 colorless mana plus 2 green pips for an 8/8 Sloth mutant. With this spell costs 1 less to cast for each counter among players and permanents, has trample, and enters the battlefield tapped.
Because it's EP.
Sleepy Mega Sloth, so slow. I don't think we actually know how fast the like extinct ground sloths from real Earth that we have to thank for the continued production of avocados were. I think they might have been kind of fast.
I think
like,
they were.
big.
Yeah.
They were big mouths. I expect they moved like cows. Like when they wanted to, they could go fast. But anyways, 8/8 trample for 12. Why are we talking about it? Because Dark Depths is so popular. Basically, like if you want to play the like Into the North Vampire Hex Mage, committed tutoring for and having multiple ways to get your Dark Depths token into play deck, this actually fits in kind of okay. Like that deck tends to be like getting Dark Depths back from the graveyard with like Ramnaps and stuff, and so like it just has 10 ice counters on a permanent more than once in the game sometimes, as it's like looking to grind out Dark Depth tokens. And then also you can fit this into +1/+1 counters deck. Obviously 10 +1/+1 counters on your permanents is a lot, but you know, you'd be surprised. Sometimes you have 8 mana, and then also there are like, you know, you have a 4/4 in play. So I just want to give this card a shout out. It's not top tier. It's not going to be like coming out swinging for you. It's not running the tables as we were talking about that Wild Wasteland enchantment. But I think this is an important card that came out this year, and people are talking about it. I wanted to mention it. I think it's cool.
Murktide Regent be like, look what they need to match a fraction of our power.
Good combo with Murktide Regent,
Yeah.
right?
So this card was very hyped because of the Dark Depths deck and Legacy.
Right.
And Legacy players were like clamoring to get Fallout product on Moto,
Yes, right.
because they're like, this deck's got to be cracked, right? We've heard it winning tournaments or popping up at locals. Like it's got to be cracked. So we need it on Legacy, you know, plus pre-war Formula Y. But like we need this card to show up so we can show how good this sloth is, and it just didn't do a damn thing.
It turns out if you have 10 ice counters, you should probably just remove them. That's probably the fastest
Yeah,
way
exactly.
for you to win the game.
But also, it's just an 8/8. It
Yeah.
comes into play tapped.
right.
Which
Yeah.
sound, but with no, I mean, trample's kind of evasion, but like, you know.
Just make it 2020.
The into play tapped is pretty rough.
Yeah.
Like this card is more adorable than anything else, but I don't know. We talked about it on the podcast.
Yes.
We acknowledged it.
We've acknowledged it.
All right, Wheeler.
Rampaging Yaoguai. X green for a 2/2 bear mutant with vigilance and trample, and Rampaging Yaoguai enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters on it. When it enters the battlefield, you destroy any number of target artifacts and/or enchantments with total mana value X or less. So this has a somewhat restrictive mana cost in being triple green, but also even in like 2-color green decks, or frankly 3-color green decks, like getting multiple green is not the problem. And when it comes to, there's a lot of Moxen running around. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but
Yes, I have played Canadian Highlander this year.
there's a lot of Moxen. There's a lot of Karnstrucks running around. There's a lot of Urza Sagas running around. And so this just blowing up 0 mana artifacts or enchantments, and specifically their 0 mana artifacts, enchantments, and not
Everybody's.
yours.
Yeah.
So
Any number of target is very relevant.
it's very good.
God, Green Sun X is 3.
Yeah. You could just like pull this out with a Green Sun, be able to just like, they're bored. They Thopter you or whatever, and you're like, okay, I'll kill all your Thopters.
Let me go over this one more time. Sorry, you pay 3 green. Like you
Yeah.
do this on, whenever you want for just 3 mana. You have a 2/2, and then the ETB trigger can target any number of 0 drops.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because they still have a total mana value of 0.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
Moxen, artifact lands, Karnstrucks,
Sagas.
Thopters, treasure tokens,
Food.
food.
Yeah.
Like
Wild.
artifact
Yeah.
counter deck just crumbles.
And if you need to get rid of a very specific 1-drop or whatever,
You can
then
pay some
you
mana.
can pay 1, kill that Shadow Spear, and then also all of your zeros.
Yeah, the Urza Saga.
Yeah.
So the ceiling on this card is really high, like for the potential
Yeah.
impact.
And then
Yeah.
it's just also trample and vigilance, right? It scales well late into the game too, like, which is a problem. I literally mentioned it with Rexage earlier on, where it's like, obviously there's some strength of Rexage hitting the table and be like, nice Phyrexian portal, idiot. But also sometimes you're like, oh, I paid 3 mana for a 2/1. This is how I'm going to kill you.
Right.
And this thing could just be like, all right, well, it's not above rate, but I'll pay 6 mana for a 5/5 vigilance trample.
I've been in plenty of positions where it's like I draw the Rexage and I'm like happy that I included it in my deck, but I just needed something that had like a 3rd toughness
Yeah.
or 3rd power. Like I can play it if I want, but I feel like I'm going to get even more value out of just doing nothing with my mana because it doesn't block for anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like the mana cost is a little restrictive, and it's not as like universal as Knight of Autumn or a Kasali Pride Mage and like what it blows up, or Outland Liberator or Cankerbloom, whatever.
Yeah.
But it does, like, if I am playing like a green deck, like a hoof deck, or if I'm playing some kind of like green X deck with Cradle, and I know there's a Time Vault player or a Paradox Engine player, or if there's an Eggs player, you can ignore them. That archetype's dead. But you get what I mean. Like
Grixis
if they're
Welder even.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah.
If I
Even
know
just
they're
all the
there,
triple Mox decks, stop
Yeah.
them from having turns off their incredible start, right?
if I know that there's going to be like a Mardu tokens deck, especially if it's Jason Jobin. I mean, if I know there's going to be Mardu tokens, like being able to be like, okay, I'm going to kill your Skull Clamp or your like Goblin Bombardment and also your Moxen or your Clue tokens.
Right.
Yeah, pretty nice.
All right, next up, another Fallout card. I mean, I think if
You've been very good
I
with
love
the
this
ones
card.
you're hitting.
Yeah, I know. I've been kind of lucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have an actual favorite of mine, a silver bullet of mine, the Alpha Deathclaw. This is a 6-mana 6/6 lizard mutant for 4, a black and a green. It has menace and trample. And when it enters the battlefield or becomes monstrous, destroy target permanent. And then monstrous 4 for 7 mana, 5 black and a green. This creature isn't monstrous. Put 4+1/+1 counters on it. It becomes monstrous. Can't even remember what monstrous was from.
Theros.
Theros. I like this card a lot, and I like it only in sort of like big mana toolkit decks. I've been playing it in Abzan Recurring Nightmare as sort of the top end target. So if you're doing sort of like Fair Reanimator, which I like to think of Recurring Nightmare decks as being Green Sun decks, maybe if you want to have Natural Order but not too big, and you maybe have more than one 6-drop like this alongside Primeval Titan, or maybe even if you're not really doing like a lands package, you could just play this instead of Primeval Titan. I think this card is great. It is a little bit expensive, but I think you really get your money's worth for this card in the right deck.
It's a dope natural order target for a Gaia's Cradle deck.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
if your targets are this and Atroxa, like, you're good, right? I've seen this in the bug, like, mid-range natural order decks, because they're just like, yeah, I Hull Breachered you on an Opt, and now I'm at 6 mana. Here's an Alpha Deathclaw.
I mean, I also like, where did my brain just go? The Rock.
Yeah.
Just a classic finisher and just big, fair, green-black. You play this, it dies, you reanimate it. Just whatever.
Card's good.
Yeah, solid card.
All right, Wheeler.
Arbaz Mir from Assassin's Creed is a 2/2 assassin human that's a legend. Reading this backwards for some reason, right to left. 2/2 red-white human assassin that's a legendary creature that says, whenever Arbaz or another non-token historic permanent enters the battlefield under your control, Arbaz deals 1 damage to each opponent and you gain 1 life. This is admittedly my of the 2 mana artifacts matter assassins. This is my least favorite of the 2, but also I've seen this pop up in a Jeskai Welder deck, or like a Jeskai. I don't know what to call it. It's like Jeskai artifact combo parentheses, but not Paradox or Time Vault. Like the Jeskai.
It's a win con next to Bomberman. If you need another one of those, lol.
Yeah, exactly. And like there's this. It's infuriating because this is a deck that I was trying to build for like years. Where I'm like Imperial Recruiter, Recruiter of the Guard, Trinket Mage, Bomberman. Like we're just Jeskai Bomberman, but we also have like Stoneforge for like Thopter Sword,
right?
And I like just never really put it together in a place that I was excited, like I was happy with it, and I kind of transitioned that idea to the Welder decks.
Yeah.
But now this is a deck that has popped up, and I didn't get to be the person to do that. And it's really lit a fire under my ass.
Make sure you bring that up as much as possible in online spaces. Just remind Wheeler that he didn't design the Arbaz Mir
good.
deck.
Like it's the. I mean, I've seen. Sorry, not their list. What I'm trying to say is that it's not like a appearing everywhere. It's just like a. It has. I mean, I think it won one of the local leagues down in the States somewhere. But like, yeah, this is a card that would slide pretty nicely into a deck that cares about having legends, cares about having cards with 2 power or 2 toughness, cares about creatures to get back with pre-war, formal wear, and just kills people because it's not 1 per turn. It's not 1 or more. And like, yeah, you're just playing these stupid eggs and Moxen, and you're just like doming them out and gaining some life. It's no Basim, but it's got the right colors.
This is the set review that I have immediately, like the Venn diagram of cards we talk about and cards that I'm buying. This is the closest to a circle we've ever had.
Yeah.
Any set review we've done.
This card actually has a lot of weird homes too, right? Like, as I mentioned, it kills them if you have Bomberman set up, but also if you have Fastbond, like Strip Mine and Crucible set up, you can just be like, okay, I'm gonna get the infinite mana, and then this thing provides you with life every time your legendary land hits the battlefield, and then you can like blow that up and get them back. So it's like if you just like, if there's the math between your life total and their life total works out, you can maybe just kill them with just lands entering the battlefield.
I mean, yeah, I guess I focused so much on the artifact deck, but it did pop up in it was either a Naya or a 5-color Legends build.
Right,
I think it might have been the same one as I saw Ezio, but like, yeah, the play pattern of this card, and you're just like, okay, untap, play a Caracas, ping you, play a Legend, ping you, Shadow Spear, ping you.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it can rack up very quickly.
Make a Construct.
It's non-token.
Oh, non-token. Sorry, right,
yeah.
non-token. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not that broken.
Okay, I'm glad we found a limit to Arbaz's power.
Yeah.
All right, Ellie.
I'm going to talk about Armory Paladin from Fallout. 1 red-white for a 3/3 human knight with trample, and whenever you cast an aura or equipment spell, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until the end of your next turn. Oof. Okay, so This card's sweet. It's got a big like flamethrower that looks like an accordion that it's holding. Sorry. Play this in equipment decks. I don't think it's going to go into Sanctum Stompy. Like it cares about auras and equipments. If your Sanctum Stompy deck wants to get into like more colors, red would probably, it's one of the colors that you could add to your Sanctum Stompy deck. I would definitely add blue first, but if you've already done that, then maybe you could add red before or white and consider this card, although it's not an enchantment itself. But definitely you're going to put it in Boros equipment or, Knights.
No,
I'm sorry, Serge or Wheeler, do you want to talk about this card?
This
I think
is a Serge card.
You can play it in equipment decks.
This is a me card. Yeah, so it's funny because equipment decks are increasingly playing fewer equipments, which is weird because at the same time we are getting more toolbox equipments with, we keep talking about pre-war formal wear, but also like the chainsaw that came out in Duskmourn. Like you're getting more stuff, but it's weird because this looks like an engine piece of you want to play a higher density of equipment, which I don't know as many are doing. I am more interested to try this in a 3-color deck with aura and equipment, just because it's weird when I think about the old Pure Steel Paladin style decks, right? If you're trying to get a ton of value, you need a certain density to make those engine cards do anything. This is nice because it has trample. Like if this was just a vanilla card that didn't have any upside, you'd have a very hard time including this like you would Pure Steel Paladin. But this is, Pure Steel Paladin also gives you the free equip, so it has, it has a different home there.
So are we on our way to Highlander Cheerios? Is that what this card is sort of a signpost of? It's like Armory Paladin. Maybe not this year, but eventually there will be enough, Cheerios cards that you can build Highlander Cheerios.
I think you would want more density for sure for something like this. I don't think this is good enough by itself in the archetypes that exist, but it does point towards maybe wanting to make something in that direction. Is my thought, is my read on this card. Let's move on to the next card, which I want to be respectful. With Assassin's Creed, the cards are real names, and I'm okay butchering fictional names. I don't want to butcher historic names.
Basim ibn Ishaq.
Thank you.
I think.
Yeah, I want to respectfully not try.
Do you want to trade?
Yes.
Okay. Basim ibn Ishaq is blue and a black for a 2/2 legendary creature human assassin that says whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Basim can't be blocked this turn. This ability triggers only once each turn. And whenever Basim deals combat damage to a player, you put a 1/1 counter on it. We've done it. We've finally figured out a way to maybe get a card that is kind of like Psychic Frog.
I was going to say, Psychic Frog, looking at this, same joke as before.
Yeah.
What you have to do to get a fraction of my power.
But
it's close. It's a big fraction, right?
Yeah. I have unfortunately not gotten to play with this card nearly as much. I played it in for one time with Grixis Welder, and it was very good there. And I just want to play more with it. That's basically the play pattern, is like you can trigger this off of other legendary creatures, which is nice because, not always casting, you are usually casting artifact cards in these decks, but like if you think about the cards that show up in these Tolarian Academy Triple Mox mid-range decks, they are artifacts, legendary creatures that care about artifacts, and I don't know. I guess you're playing a Saga.
Some spells too.
Yeah, or it's Urza's Saga or Fable the Mirror Breaker.
Right.
And like you are getting to trigger this guy to draw a card and then smack them and continuously grow. It's a 2-drop. It draws you cards when you cast your Mishra's Bauble and gets bigger. And I like that. I'd play it. In those decks, I'd play it alongside Psychic Frog, where it can do a pretty reasonable impression of Psychic Frog. Obviously, it's not Psychic Frog. Nothing else is. That card is unreal.
Yeah.
But it does a pretty great job in that style of deck.
All right. Now, the other side of the trade, back to the Fallout set, we have Caesar, Legion's Emperor, or as they pronounce in the video game, Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Just want to, shout out. Legendary creature, human soldier, 4/4. So 4 mana legendary 4/4. Whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, choose 2 of the following. Create 2 1/1 red-white soldier creature tokens with haste that are tapped and attacking. Draw a card, lose a life. Or Kaiser deals damage equal to the number of creature tokens you control to target opponent.
And what does it cost?
It costs 1, a red, a white, and a black. So 1 and a Mardu. I missed that part, eh?
We just didn't say. You said 4 mana. Yeah,
Right.
No worries.
Choose 2 is very cool. And notably, it's whenever you attack, not whenever Kaiser attacks. So this is a very interesting top-end finisher for Mardu tokens. It makes tokens, it sacrifices tokens, it gives you a draw engine, and it gives you an interesting finisher. Now, notably, the final ability, deal damage equal the number of creature tokens you control to target opponent. You can't use it to clear other things, like sometimes you'd expect maybe any target. And you could also, whenever you choose multiple modes, you always resolve them in order of top to bottom. So if you made 2 tokens, you would count those when you do the final ability at the end. I don't think this is good enough to really be a mid-range threat. I mean, maybe. It is a lot of abilities. And it is, because it's whenever you attack, it kind of has pseudo haste for those triggered abilities, but I like it in the tokens deck.
I haven't tried it in Mardu Aristocrats, but I could see it in Mardu Aristocrats. Like, I died to this card, or did I die? I think I died to this card against 4-color no green tokens, which is basically Mardu tokens, except what if we played blue cards as well? And it was pretty good there. Won the match, by the way. But like in like Aristocrats as a top end. What? I mean, I'm just saying I lost to this card when they had it.
Okay.
But then I won the match.
This was the only card that could beat Wheeler.
It was
the 4-color.
It was.
No green tokens.
Poor Sasha. But he's a counselor. I can throw him under the bus.
It does do everything that you want in Aristocrats. Like it
Makes tokens and domes you.
It's 1 card for like 3 bodies and a sacrifice outlet.
It's also just like kind of the perfect top end in that. What do you want out of a top end for that kind of deck? Like
Hasty damage.
the Yogg Father, or like I'm killing you. Like Falconwrath Aristocrat and Butcher the Horde are cool.
Sure.
But they're also from the year like 2001.
Right. But Butcher the Horde, like one of the reasons that people like playing it is because it kills them, right?
Yes,
like
yeah,
that's
exactly.
The idea. You get hasty 5 power, right?
Right, but this is killing them for the modern era where it has so many lines of text.
Yeah, we're killing you
read
with
the short
4
stories.
words. Yeah, exactly.
Amazing.
Obviously, it does some other things. Like if you can't kill them with this or Butcher the Horde, this still draws you cards.
Yeah.
Puts more bodies on the table. With Butcher the Horde, could never.
Yeah.
Could never. All right, we'll do Nelly and then back to me. So Nelly.
Sure. Inventory management, also from Fallout, for a red and a white, an instant with split second. That means as long as it's on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. Basically uncounterable. For each aura and equipment you control, you may attach it to a creature you control. Wow, the last 2 cards that I got to read in the gold section are real. They're real thinkers about which archetype you would play them in.
Well, okay, you are sitting between 2 people who like red-white equipment but have different builds
different
with.
way.
Because I want to
I've
put
also
a
built-
hammer.
You want to put the Colossal Hammer Cauldron
I'm
complete
right.
version on
Yeah,
it.
I want a
like
hammer.
I like playing all the creatures that are like I like wearing the equipments. Like I like Goblin Hammer Wielder or whatever that
Gavelineer?
Gavelineer. I like Gavelineer a lot.
Sure.
Yeah, I like playing
So
those cards.
you need to do one of 2 things with this.
Sure.
You either need to cheat on mana or be moving around defensive abilities. Because there's the old dream of like having a Lannan Shikari in play with Lightning Greaves, and then anytime they try and kill your thing, you're like, the boots!
Right.
And you just move it around and you counter everything. So
Right.
one use of this is defensive, or the other is the Ben Wheeler style, which is you play a 1-mana Colossal Hammer, and then you play this, and then you hit them with, your Swiftblade Vindicator gets that for free on turn 3. and
Oh,
you're
I
like,
don't play the Vindicator.
Okay, but
The thing
someone
about
will
that thing about the hammer is it doesn't matter who holds it.
Right.
They just have
hit
to
them
hold
for
it.
10. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously this goes in hammer time. And then, or as Serge said, it could be in any deck if you're planning to get them with boots or just have fun mid-combat and kill their block.
I mean, it does feel like the handshake between our 2 versions, where it's like this could put on hammer and protect, and you're like, well, this can protect and occasionally put on the Cauldron Complete. And it's like, okay, we agree. This is what brings the 2 factions together.
It's like, inventory management is just the picture of the 2 hands shaking, right? 2 muscly hands.
What is the name of that black equipment that it gives equipped creature plus X plus O equal the number of artifacts you control, but for black
Cranial
white.
plating.
Cranial plating, right? And cranial plating's the terror of Affinity when that was a top tier deck was the threat of instant speed movement, because it makes combat math a nightmare. And that's sort of what this can do, but once.
Yeah.
Anyways,
But with split second.
but with split second. That's
Also,
true.
I mean, shout out to the flavor design of this card, right? It has split second. It's an instant of let me just swap all of my gear around, right? Like you're
Like you're playing the game.
Yeah,
pause,
you're playing the
I have
game
a
and
shotgun now.
you
Yeah.
push whatever the button is to move your equipment
Tab.
around. Suddenly, instead of this sword, I have a hammer or whatever. Yeah.
All right, next up, we're going to talk about Lara Croft Tomb Raider this is a secret lair. This wasn't.
Yeah.
Only through Secret Lair. Yeah. I wish I bought it.
Yeah, this one had some issues. There were some complaints from people being like, it feels bad that there's a mechanically unique card that you can only get through a secret lair
Yep.
for secret lair
And they
availability
couldn't hear
reasons.
you throw the money.
Yeah. I would like to echo that complaint.
We'll take that discourse and set it over here, but we acknowledge it. All right, Lara Croft is a 3-mana legendary human ranger 3/4 for a green, a blue, and a red, which is, they call it Teamer now?
Yeah.
For the past 15 years, yeah.
Lara has first strike and reach, and whenever she attacks, exile up to 1 target legendary artifact card or legendary land card from a graveyard and put a discovery counter on it. You may play a card from exiled with a discovery counter on it on any time. And raid ability. At the end of combat on your turn, if you attacked this turn, create a treasure token. So notably, the second ability is any combat, and the first ability is only when Lara attacks. You have your hand up.
You did say any time.
But it's
You
just
said you
this
may
turn.
play a card from exile with a discovery counter on it any time. It's,
Oh, sorry,
you can
this
play
turn.
yes, only that turn.
Sorry,
so
only
that's
that turn.
one whole ability
Right,
of
right,
she
right, right,
attacks,
right.
exile, counter. You can play a card in exile with a discovery counter on it this turn.
Sorry, thank you. Nice catch. I put a lot of emphasis on the any graveyard, and that kind of threw off the reading of the rest of the ability and stuff like that. Because I'm going to be honest, the first time I read Lara, I haven't really looked into this card too much because of the availability issue. It's kind of like when the Walking Dead came out and everyone was really excited about that one guy, and I was like, I'm never going Rick.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm never going to care because I'm never going to own a Rick. That's kind of how I approached Lara Croft.
Sure.
Full disclaimer.
Man who owns Moxon can't buy $25 card. Sorry, I don't
News
know
at
why I
7.
roasted you there, but you're like, I can't find this thing. Anyways, I got this cool Tabernacle deck.
All right, you know what? That's fair. That's fair. We are in a very interesting position
Yeah.
as Eternal players. Look, and all right, a side story. At Yellow Jacket, we allow proxies for tournaments to get more people out so people can test decks. One of my favorite moments was sitting across from a fellow BattleBot and Academy and Workshop player and looking through the whole deck, and it's all foiled out. It's all beautiful fetches, foils, duels, Moxen, everything. And the one card they had proxied was a Mishra's Bauble.
Couldn't find it.
Because they couldn't find the
find it.
25-cent card. And
Oh,
Well, Mishra's Baubles was
sorry.
like $25 or $40
Sorry.
for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
but yeah, it's the classic. You have these thousands of dollars of cards, and you can't find the common.
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways,
So
who's
Lara
playing this deck? Yeah, who's playing
Lara
this card?
is interesting. You're playing this. Is it so? It's a human, so it probably goes in the legendary human deck.
Oh,
No,
I
take it away because
what do
I
you
can
wanna do with this?
speculate. and I can
Rug
spitball on this,
Saga.
but I have a really hard time. Sorry, Rug
Saga.
Saga.
So there's a
Is
rug.
one free player as a Saga over and
Yeah, it's a triple Moxen +1 kind
Sure.
of deck where you are looking to play these mid-range cards that care about artifacts and making game objects, and you tend to play a large number of just cheap legendary lands as well as some number of legendary artifacts such as Mox Opal or Tolarian Academy or any of the channel lands that you may have discarded and put into the graveyard.
I was
or
looking
your
at that.
opponent has done.
When I looked at this card, I specifically looked at the rules interaction of, okay, so you have Beseiju in your graveyard. If you exile it, can you and you're like, well, no, because channel needs to
Yeah.
be discarded from hand. But it does work as like a bad slow crucible in that way, just to give you a little bit more value.
Yeah,
Anyways,
Shadow Spear,
Yeah, you
like
can keep
they're
going.
Yeah.
It's not that bad or slow. It costs the same amount of mana as Crucible and takes one extra turn before she can attack. But then it doesn't cost more mana to get the card.
Yeah.
So it's not that bad.
Like, even if you don't have the, I mean, you want to play this in a deck that can take advantage of the first triggered ability, but if you don't have it, then you just have a 3-mana, 3/4 first strike reach, which is a really annoying stat line.
Yep.
Even if it's on a legend, that has an ability that will make treasure tokens just if you've attacked. You don't have to have attacked with Lara.
Yeah.
You just have to have attacked to make a treasure. So there are plenty of like spots where you can read this card as like on curve, here's a 3/4 first strike reach, make a treasure, which is pretty good in a deck that just wants to play a bunch of artifacts and maybe do stuff with your Urza,
Well, hitting your opponent's graveyard is actually huge too.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to, I don't know. I had missed that my first read through, and I'm higher on that card.
Nice
than I was.
dark depths that I've dealt with once.
I mean, or just take their Urza Saga, right?
Well, Saga's not a legendary land.
Right. It has to be
It's
legendary.
not a legendary
it doesn't
land?
say-
Sorry.
We've been reading all these assassin cards that say historic, but this one specifically
Sure,
only
sorry.
legendary.
Look, Urza Saga has so many things printed on it. It's an enchantment saga land that makes artifacts and tutors. Forgive me for not realizing it wasn't legendary. You can play more than one card of that in other formats? One copy of that?
Well, not vintage,
Why isn't it
but
legendary?
Urza went on many
legendary
sagas.
lands are a feel bad.
Just further solidifying the comments being like, have any of you ever actually read Urza's Saga?
Oh, don't lump me in with you two.
I've read it so many times. It keeps being different every time I read it.
That's what I keep having. All right.
So fancy jeweled thief is the floor on this card basically. Like it's
fancy jewel thief
it's
is
legendary.
very funny.
It's legendary.
Yeah.
So like that can be a problem.
Really defensive, like good on defense, jewel thief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the ceiling is like we're getting back game object cards every turn because we're playing it in this deck with lots of
With
channel
looting,
lands.
with channel lands,
Yeah.
with cheap legendary artifacts. But yeah.
All right.
All right. Now that I've butchered Lara Croft, Wheeler, back to you.
Liberty Prime Recharged. 2 blue, red, and a white for an 8/8 legendary artifact creature robot with vigilance, trample, and haste. That says whenever Liberty Prime Recharged attacks or blocks, sacrifice it unless you pay 2 energy. Pay 2 generic, tap, sacrifice an artifact. You get 2 energy and draw a card. Democracy is non-negotiable. Yeah, this is going to be our energy card. We've talked about the energy deck a little bit. We maybe even talked about it with Modern Horizons 3 of like, I don't think there's going to be an energy deck. If there is, it's going to be like whatever.
One more set though. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still not entirely convinced, but it has had multiple like tournament or league like wins or appearances by different players. And that's enough for me to look at it and be like, look, you could probably win your weekly with this deck. And you could win your weekly with a deck that nobody knows what you're doing or why you're doing
You
it.
look at every card in this and you're like, okay, these things make energy and they look below cost or bad, and you just don't want to do the math of like, okay, yeah, whatever. You wave your hands at it and then you're like, wait, how am I dead?
Right.
Well, we're so used to looking at energy in Canlander in a vacuum of like, Galvanic Discharge is good because it deals up to 3 damage. And then when we talk about it in other applications, it's like, and I guess you could Snapcaster it, and like if you paid 2 the first time, you can pay 4 the next time, right? So like that's how we tend to evaluate energy cards because we don't play with other energy cards. But then when you finally get a density of like above rate energy cards, that also just makes your standard rate energy cards absurd. Right?
The Guide of Souls is just jumping something the turn you play
Every
it.
single, it just, and that is pretty wild. Like you will have the energy to get this card going. And it just kills somebody out of nowhere. 5 mana, 8/8 Vigilance, Trample, Haste.
That's a lot of stats.
That's a lot.
What are the colors that energy players are playing? Because this one is obviously just Sky. We've talked about a lot of green ones. Are they 4 color? Are they narrower?
I've seen 4 color typically with no black or 5 color, but 4 color is 4 color is the big one, I think, because realistically you want a Tune with Aether and Liberty Prime. Like those are the 2 like modes.
Which one's a Tune with Aether?
Tune with Aether is lay of a land, but get 2 energy.
1 green sorcery, find a basic land.
The card that bad players are like, how did this ever get banned? And it's like, cause it draws a card, fixes your mana, and gives you this other resource.
Because it fuels the energy deck. Yeah.
Now, I know we normally don't talk about other formats because it's not relevant, but like when energy is getting banned in Modern
Yeah.
as well, you have to be like, well, hold on a second. Like, why is this so real?
Yeah, Amped Raptor. I mean, when Amped Raptor got printed, people, like, popular modern streamers were like, it's not a question of whether it will get banned, it's when it will get banned.
Right.
And, well, it turns out that it got banned in the first, like, non-Nadu banning for MH3. Yeah, like, the energy cards are cracked. That's something that I would like to actually bring to on, like, a Friday Night Paper Fight or something, because I don't know if I want to put it on Showdown necessarily. I was thinking about bringing food next time, but like something for a paper fight.
Stop kicking him. He said he's going to stop bringing it.
Bro.
I'm sorry.
You got to get off him.
Sorry.
All right.
We need to take him to the hospital.
I'm sorry.
All right, Nelly, take us home. Last card.
The Cyber Controller from Doctor Who. It's probably the Cyber Controller. Sorry, Doctor Who fans. I don't know. X, blue, black for a 3/3 legendary artifact creature, Cyberman. When the Cyber Controller enters the battlefield, each opponent mills X cards. Put all creature cards milled this way onto the battlefield face down under your control. They're 2/2 Cyberman artifact creatures, and other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. Rad. Sorry.
I've read this card so many times, and I don't get it.
So
What?
So there's two
Is
things
it
going
just
on here.
Lord?
Yeah, there's two things going on here. It's a 3/3 for 3 that you can put into your Esper or Grixis like welder beatdown decks, right? Like the mid-range decks we've been talking about a bunch, and I've brought to Showdown earlier this year, a couple of different versions. You know, the best card in your deck is usually going to be Urza's Saga, but you're playing a whole bunch of like stuff that cares about artifact creatures, like Scorpek Lord from Warhammer 40,000 ended up being like one of the most impactful cards in those decks for me, just because you grind and you like sometimes mill your stuff and you get extra value out of like binning this unearthed creature, and then for 2 mana you give your creatures +1/+0 and menace for 1 turn, and that was often enough. So this pumps your other creatures the same way that a Master of Ethereum would, just your artifact creatures. But then it's got a second mode where for as much extra mana as you want to put into it, you mill them and then get more 3/3s, right? Like they're 2/2 artifact creatures that are face down. If they happen to have morph, I guess you could turn them face up. This card doesn't give them a way to turn face up on its own, but if you do hit a morph creature, that's not very common that you're going to do that, but you could potentially get more value out of it. You could also, if you're playing a deck that's like, I don't recommend this, but I'll let the haters know. If you're playing a deck that makes infinite mana, like this is a mid-range card that could be a 3/3 for 3 that blocks, kind of like I mentioned the squad earlier, the 2/2 tokens pumping squad is like, this is an early-ish drop that also provides you a way to
infinite mana finisher.
Yeah, it provides you a way to win the game if you're playing a deck that has an infinite mana combo. So yeah, it's got all that going on, but I don't know. I hadn't seen this card when I last built a
Did I just overthink this?
An Esper aggro deck.
Yeah.
Because I looked at this and I was just like, is there some kind of weird combo application? Am I excited to just have a 3 mana Lord?
Yeah.
Like, what is the amount of mana that you want to put into this
Uh,
to be happy?
3 or more. Like, I don't know what to tell you. I think you're overthinking it.
You're
right?
overthinking it.
You're a deck. If you're
3 or more.
if you're playing this in a deck with artifact creatures,
Sure.
and you want to play lords to buff your artifact creatures, which we have established these decks exist,
Yeah.
then 3 mana for a 3/3 that gets to pump your other artifact creatures is pretty nice. We've also acknowledged that some of these decks play cards that care about legends, and so there are some synergies surrounding that, especially within these colors, if we're like playing Basim or something. But we're also a Tolarian Academy deck, which means that we get above 3 mana. And if I'm just like, oh, 8 mana, play this thing, get a 3/3, and then I get 2 additional 3/3s.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice. Or
Maybe
like,
you high roll, maybe
Yeah.
like this is like lethal on the board or whatever.
yeah,
you know?
or if, like Nelson says, like maybe there is a world where I haven't actually looked into it, but like maybe there's a world where you want more than Walking Ballista, as you're like, I've generated infinite mana and I need to kill them with an artifact. How am I doing this?
Yeah, or maybe not where you wanted to use anything other than Walking Ballista, but like this fits that deck too.
Yeah.
And so it just gives you another copy.
Yes, yeah. You
Yeah.
play it with redundancy.
Yeah,
Like as a redundant piece.
It's not that you have to aim for this or the Securitron squad as like a, oh yeah, I'm gonna win with this infinite mana. It's like that's worse than Ballista,
Yeah.
but maybe you draw this one and you have infinite mana.
I just absolutely fought myself into a trap with this one because I was just like, but how do I really abuse that first ability? And the answer is you just don't.
Yeah, you just play it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just tap your mana and cast your card.
3/3 for 3 artifact legendary creature that gives your other plus artifact creatures +1/+1. We don't exactly have that on any other card.
Sure.
And this has this other ability if you have more mana.
Yep.
Let's talk about these products as a whole, because we like to end our set reviews with some thoughts, and I will go first. And especially after Wheeler eviscerated me on the cost of these cards, I do want to say that, at least for me and the way that I shop for Magic cards, these are harder to get a hold of, because a lot of them come from, like, Assassin's Creed. I feel like very few people opened. And I feel like the window where people cared about that set and where it was opened, and then it just went away. And so there's just not a lot of it that exists out there. A lot of the cards come from Commander product, which is tough because unless your local store is cracking those boxes for singles, which a lot seem to do, or people are cracking them and selling them, or if you're the type of person who buys an entire Commander box just to get a couple cards, again, none of those apply to me. Those are kind of hard. So I'm the type of player that likes to look at my store case and window shop, and these cards don't show up that often. And as such, I don't get to encounter and play with them as much unless I go out of my way to be like, okay, this is high enough on my list that the 1 or 2 times a year that I actually do an online store order, they come in. And that's too bad, because a lot of these are cool. A lot of these are laser targeted for the types of decks and strategies I'd like to play. And I guess I'm going to be making a cardkingdom.com/LRR affiliate order sometime soon, because I want to be playing with more of these cards.
Yeah, I mean, it's a drag, especially the Assassin's Creed set. I think that might be the only time they're going to do that kind of a delivery. I know it was sort of similar to March Machine, but it's worth acknowledging that, like, the product itself of Assassin's Creed was a bit of a flop. I was just expecting, when I heard that there would be Assassin's Creed product, we would get another set of Commander decks, even if it was just 2, because I think that Fallout and Doctor Who were both pretty good products, honestly. Like, the match that you play with those 4 decks was totally fine. And their players do exist who are just like, I'll just buy that Commander deck to get that card, and maybe I'll also play the Commander deck first or whatever, or I'll use the other cards for something else. Yeah, that's the main thing. But still, it is more fun to have cards in regular sets, like, that are easy to get a hold of. That's nice. Like, draftable set Lord of the Rings, like, tons of that pack was opened.
On my grandmother's grave, I'm not using this as a dig at either of you two,
Sure.
but realistically, the best way to, like, look through these sets, because there is a lot of gold. I got burned with this in Warhammer 40K, where I was like, I hate this IP, I don't like this or whatever. But then I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a Magic player that likes to win events. I should probably do my diligence and, like, look through all of these. Is that really, you just got to look at the set.
Sure.
Like, you got to sit down and go through the set. Just, like, it's a lot of cards at times, but just, like, sitting down and digesting all of these cards, because there are some things that we didn't talk about, right? Like, admittedly, we trimmed some cards because they were more niche, but they could pop. There are cards that we trimmed that would show up in Sanctum Stomping,
Right.
that would show up in like Mono Black.
Yeah, some
like,
straightforward role players that
Yeah.
you're going to see in decks, just not that deserve a whole breakdown.
And it's to your benefit as both a player of a format as vast as Highlander, and also as collectors and people that enjoy the game in, like, for all its niche kind of builds and directions of, like, yeah, I want to know when there's, like, a goofy, like, Crystal Skull Mystic Forge in a product that I would saw off my left foot to have not exist. Right?
Right, yeah.
Like, yeah. It's there are some genuine gold in these sets.
Let's go back to Magic Boomer stuff. Remember when we used to hold Commander product in Contempt, and then they printed True Name Nemesis? And Eternal players are like, wait, hold on.
Well, that caused me to hate it. I was like, sure, whatever, do this thing. And then it's like, I got to buy this $50 fish that I can only get from this deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, but nowadays, I mean, yeah, it's just like, I don't know. My relationship with these has been like, go through the set and be like, I could play this, and then just make an order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be making an order soon.
But yeah, they came up with, as you just heard, tons of really interesting cards in these products.
Yep.
Like, to Wizards' credit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking forward to playing with more of them. And many of them we've already won lots of games with.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for watching our, I guess we're going to call it Universes Beyond Roundup. This is the second time we've done one of these. We do wait a while to let them build up. These don't come with every set, and hopefully you enjoy what this turns into at the end of it, because it's an interesting journey of going through all of these and seeing which ones are worth talking about, which ones aren't. Reminder that everything we do is brought to you by you if you're part of the Patreon over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. Thank you. My name has been Serge, joined by Anelli.
Hey, I had fun.
We had Wheeler.
I only have one drink now.
Shout out to James on Tech.
I'm out of drinks.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.